Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you, Nanette. I am delighted to welcome you to our Ash Wednesday breakfast. And first of all, I want to thank Pam and Margie for the wonderful breakfast. Thank you so much. I haven't had breakfast this early in probably my whole life. So thank you. And I am delighted to get to introduce Jean Larson this morning. Jean and I have been friends for many, many years, and it's like so cool that now we're colleagues and we get to work and do ministry together. So it's been just a whole nother level of fun and wonderfulness. So we've heard Jean tell her story in some of our small groups, and you will just love to hear her story of faith and her call to ministry in this place. And so welcome, Jean. We're delighted that you're here. And welcome all those people who are watching from home.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Meredith. That was a lovely introduction. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's good to see you all here today. I'm afraid you've all probably heard at least bits and pieces of this story before, so I'm sorry if I'm redundant up here. But Rich asked a few weeks ago if I would share my faith journey and how that kind of brought me here to be the faith community nurse at First Congregational Church. And what I would say is my faith brought me to nursing, but my nursing practices always has very deeply affected my faith as well. So I thought I'd start kind of at the beginning. I'm an only child. It was my mom who brought me to church as a very little girl. We moved out to Park Ridge from the city when I was 2 years old, and she found South Park Church, which is a non-denominational, very evangelical church. I grew up there. I loved going. She and I would go on a Sunday morning. My dad was agnostic. He adored having the house to himself on Sunday morning while the two of us went off to church. So I grew up in Sunday school classes, memorizing Bible verses, hearing Bible stories. I can still remember many of my Sunday school teachers from back in those days. And I went on through youth groups. Sun City was the high school youth group, the equivalent of what PF is here. It was remarkable in that day. The church itself was much like this church. It was just a church that sat in a very residential neighborhood. When the founders of Sun City, who are Dave, I'm going to get these names wrong, so hang on one second. Dave Humble and Bill Hybels, you probably recognize that second name, founded this youth group in the 1970s, and they brought hundreds and hundreds of kids into the church from the community on Thursday evenings, much to the dismay of many of the neighbors as they trampled over lawns and such. But it was really a phenomenal experience at that time. Every Thursday night there would be hundreds of kids with a band and playing games and all that kind of thing. Now, by the time I didn't get to that when Bill Hybels and Dave Humble were there, because they went on to plant Willow Creek Church up in Barrington. But just that gives you a little bit of sense of the type of church background that I came from. I also went to Maine South High School, which is very big, just like LT. So I don't know if any of you know this about me, but I'm pretty introverted, and I'm a pretty shy person. So being in a very big high school and a large youth group, although the youth group is where I thrived, when it came time to go to college, I knew that I wanted a small Christian college, and I knew that I wanted to go into nursing. And I knew that because I was working I think sophomore, junior year in high school, I started working as a nursing assistant in a local nursing home in the evenings. From 3 to 7, I'd help people eat their meals and get ready for bed. And over time, I just really grew to respect the nurses that I worked with, or for, basically, at that time, and the other nursing assistants. So my parents grew up during the Depression, and neither of them had gone away to college. My dad really wanted me to have that opportunity, but his one criteria was that I needed to know what I was going to do before I went to school. So a little different than how we think maybe these days, but he didn't want to spend all his hard-earned money on me going to a school and not having an idea of what I wanted. So I'm like, well, I like my current job and I really like the nurses I work with, so I think I'll go into nursing. And then we landed on North Park College, which is on the north side of Chicago. Small Christian school. Was a very good fit for me with my shy, introverted self. The entire population of the school was the same as my graduating class from college, so it was a much different community. Great nursing school, though. I had a lot of very good opportunities during my clinical rotations at Northwestern and Children's Memorial Hospital and many other of the Chicago area hospitals. So very solid foundation in nursing. And when I graduated, I started my career at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center, which is now just known as Rush. Now, I graduated from college in 1983. And so the last pandemic was happening then. So it was the AIDS pandemic, or AIDS epidemic is what we called it, was going on then. And I started working on a general medical floor with telemetry, so heart monitoring going on. And then probably over the first year or so that I was there, Rush decided that they would dedicate a wing, or like one part of the floor, to patients who had HIV/AIDS. And they did that because they wanted to be sure that the physicians treating these patients, the nursing staff taking care of them, wanted to do that. They didn't want to put these mostly men at the time in a position of being, treated poorly or looked down upon because of their disease process, or being feared, because at that point in time we didn't really thoroughly understand how AIDS was transmitted from person to person. So I think you can kind of see now where my work kind of impacted my faith. I grew up in a very evangelical, conservative Christian faith where homosexuality was wrong. It was very black and white, and that was wrong. And here I was working with AIDS patients and seeing these men in relationship with each other, and they were like so loving and kind. And I was like, I don't understand why this love is any different than the love between a man and a woman. And it really sent me into a crisis of faith for a while. I went back to one of the ministers, the youth minister actually, at my church in Park Ridge to talk with him about this. And he was really very open, and while that wasn't the belief of that church, he encouraged me to really kind of explore my faith with this new concept. So that's kind of where I broke more away from that conservative evangelical background, because I couldn't stick with that and practice nursing with these people who my faith said were sinners and doing something wrong, and it didn't look that way to me at all. So that is probably one of the primary ways that my work as a nurse influenced my faith. I chose nursing because as a Christian I wanted also to do for other people, to take care of other people, to walk with other people while they were sick. So they kind of have gone back and forth over the years. But then I met my husband, Tom, and we got married, and he had a job opportunity out in Rockford, Illinois, which is where he was from. So I packed up my bags, got married, and moved out to Rockford, Illinois, which was a good thing at the time. Tom's family still lived there, his mom and dad. His dad became very ill while we were there, so we had a good time to spend with him. But Tom's family is all Catholic, so here we go again, exploring a little bit more about faith. They were gracious and kind for the most part, especially his dad, in welcoming me into the family. My mother-in-law was Italian and Catholic, and so she had very distinct ideas of how this was going to go. And I had distinct ideas of how this was going to go. And Tom at the time wasn't really, he was very good at sneaking into the back of the church on a Sunday morning to grab the bulletin to see what the homily was, the title of the homily, so he could sit down at Sunday dinner and make up a story about what he had heard in church that day. So I won. We did end up getting married at South Park Church. My youth director is the person who married us. But then when we were living in Rockford, we settled in a Lutheran church there because it did have some elements of the Catholic faith that he felt more comfortable with, without all of it for me to feel uncomfortable with. His mom and I had a very, very lovely relationship. There were just a few sticky moments there at the beginning. So anyways, let me see, where am I here? While we were in Rockford, I ended up commuting back to Rush and did my master's degree there in geriatric nursing, starting out in the nursing home, and then gave me a love for taking care of older people. My own parents were older. My parents were 38 and 40 when I was born. Not that you'd ever know that. They were like the youngest old people ever. And then my grandfather was 80 when I was born, and he lived until he was 97. And he was like one of the most special people in the world to me. So all of those things kind of led to me having a passion for geriatric nursing, and that's what my master's degree is in from Rush. Tom had another job opportunity back here in Chicago, and I said, hold my coffee, I'm going to go put the for sale sign out in the yard, let's go back. So we moved back. We moved into LaGrange. I worked at Hines VA in their extended care center. I like to say I had 60 grumpy old men to look after, and I loved every minute of doing that. I know the VA gets a bad rap in a lot of ways, but I'm here to tell you that place gave really good care to the veterans. It's not fancy. It's not a beautiful place when you walk into it, but at the time that I worked there, the staff was simply amazing. And so it was actually hard for me to leave that setting and go into community nursing homes, because I was like, well, how come we're not reviewing everybody's care plan with the entire team sitting around the table, knowing what has gone on with this person and deciding the path forward on like a monthly basis? That doesn't happen so much in nursing homes that we know. We get like a 2-second care conference and go on. But the vets at that point in time were really, really, really well cared for there. So I worked there for a while. We moved to LaGrange. We, looked into, do we want to try a Catholic church? Is this the time to do that? Do we want to? So we did some church shopping when we got back here, and it wasn't really until we started having our children. So Kate was born in 1996, and then Joe and Ian followed 2 and 3 years after that. And the kids were going to the Methodist preschool in LaGrange, and we were standing outside as moms do after preschool drop-off, and Lori Lubera, who many of you may know, church member here for a long, long time, and I were talking, and she said to me, you just have to come try the Congregational Church in Western Springs. There's this guy that, our pastor is Rich Kircher, and he's amazing. You just have to come and try this. And so Tom and I did, and we've never really looked back from there. So that was about 20 years ago. Ian was baptized here. He'll be 20 on Friday. Hard to believe that is true, but it is. So anyways, after my kids were born, I had the honor and the privilege of being able to stay home with them for several years. It was also during that time period that my own parents struggled with their health. My mom had Alzheimer's disease, and my dad just had cardiac issues, neurological issues. So it was a blessing and a privilege for me to be able to walk with them pretty closely through those years of their life. So when Kate went off to college, it was time for me. Oh, I want to back up a little bit. So during those times when I was home with my children, it was this church that really sustained me, that kept me going, where I grew so much in my faith through many avenues. I would say the Thursday morning book group. Actually, Leslie Ritter Jenkins is here. I can remember very clearly that you were announcing that there was going to be a book study, a Bible study, in the evening at 7 o'clock starting. And when we were walking out of church, I pulled you aside and I said, oh, I would really love to come to a Bible study, but my husband travels and I've got 3 little kids, and 7 o'clock on a whatever night is not going to work for me, but I really wish I could do that. And Leslie said, I'm pretty sure Claire Kralovic and a couple other women are getting this Thursday morning book group going. It was going before, it took a hiatus, and I think it's going again. Well, that was that. That was, it did start shortly after that time period and was a wonderful group of women reading books together, discussing our faith, challenging each other, and growing. So that was one big aspect of it, but also the opportunity to serve on various committees here at church, on Christian Ed, teaching Sunday school. I'm not a good Sunday school teacher, not my forte, but I enjoyed it. Executive committee, and Women's Society. Women's Society was also a very, very special place for me during those years, for fellowship, for service. Rummage is such an amazing thing here at church. So all of those things were ways that I felt connected. I felt like I was both growing as a person, growing in my faith, and also had opportunities to give back and do different things here at church. So once Kate went off to college, I started working for a company called Elder Care Solutions Elder Guardians. It's a small company of all nurses. There's 6 nurses that work for this company, started by Signe Gleason about 25 years ago, doing geriatric care management. And we do everything from just a consult on what might need to be done in a given situation to full-on rent a daughter, come in and kind of take over everything that needs to be taken over, finding caregivers, going to doctor's appointments, filling pill boxes, communicating with other family members. As an only child, I never had to do that. I so appreciated being an only child at that point in time. I love doing that and learned so much through the years that I worked with Elder Care Solutions, Elder Guardians. And so Deb Stankiewicz actually referred people to this company. So she knew the work that the company was doing. And actually Deb had been at Hines VA before I had been there. So she kind of knew a little bit of my background and thought that maybe if she was thinking of retiring, she was wondering if I would be interested in maybe the job. And I mean, she approached me probably a couple years before she actually retired. I'll think about it. And I talked to my family, and Ian said, that job is like made for you. You have to take that job. You love you love church, you love your faith, you love nursing, you get to put all of that together. And he's a wise guy. He was right, yeah. So being here, so I'm going to back up once more time. The working with Elder Care Solutions was very independent work. If we needed to consult one another about ideas to do things one way or another, people were always at the ready to pick up the phone to do it. But it was pick up the phone to do it. We got together maybe a couple times a year. I really missed being part of a staff that is together, that's face to face. Well, I started here in November of 2020, so face-to-face, I'm not sure that was exactly the situation, maybe behind the mask, but so that's one of the things that I really enjoy about working here is being just a part of the staff, the whole staff, the pastoral staff, of course, but the whole staff is just a joy to work with here. And the work here gives me the opportunity to really put into practice my own faith. And the work here also continues to challenge my own faith. So I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Hang on. So does anyone have questions or things they're curious about that they'd like to ask Jean?
Okay, I'm not taking any from Michelle.
Just the staff response, we are so glad to have you
Yeah.
here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So was I right when a few years ago I saw you and Deb at the Grapevine having lunch and I was like,
Yes,
interesting.
you were. So Deb and I went out, and that was the first time that Deb and I had sat down to kind of talk about what her job actually entailed. And here come in Michelle and a couple of other friends of mine and sat down, like plopped themselves down right next to us. Like, really?
Interesting. You guys see what's happening.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
How does your husband feel about the fact that he retired and now you're working? Like, so bullish time, is he okay with that?
He's okay with that. He's starting his own business now on a part-time basis as well, so we're hoping that that will keep him a little bit busy. It's been an adjustment, I'll have to say. Like, it's been an adjustment for him to retire in the midst of a pandemic, and he retired a year ago in the winter. So it's been a very big adjustment for him. So that part, you know, he's like, where are you going? I'm going to work. Are you going to work all day? Yes, I am. And yeah. Another thing that I really appreciate here is my office, because our house has been under construction for a very long time. So working from home is very tricky for me to do. That office is like a sanctuary within this building of sanctuary, and it's a very special place to be. So, and it also helps me escape my husband, who is wondering. I'm going to that office, yeah.
This is being taped.
Okay, love you, Tom.
Get at it.
Yeah.
Jean, you started, as you mentioned, in a really challenging time.
Mhm.
And you did it with grace, and I mean, you connected with people in the midst of the pandemic. Do you talk a little bit about how you did that and how challenging it was?
Well, that I took a lesson from my husband, who's in sales. I felt kind of like a cold call salesperson for those first months. I mean, we were in the thick of the pandemic when I started in November of 2020. There were very few people working in the building. All church services were remote. And I would have a list of people that I was kind of calling through, introducing myself. I'm here, I'm taking over for Deb, trying to check in on people, that type of thing. I couldn't go to any of the nursing homes. We couldn't go into hospitals. We weren't really comfortable at that point. This is before vaccination, so going to do home visits was kind of a scary thing to do back then. So it was a lot of phone calls. And I'm grateful that I knew a lot of people in the congregation before I started working here. You know, having been around for almost 20 years at that point was helpful. So if people didn't know me personally, they may know who I was, or if I didn't know them personally, I may know who they were. But yeah, it was tricky. So like the last few days have been a lot of work, a lot of kind of, you know, few weeks have been a lot of work, a lot of trying to scramble and figure out how are we moving forward now that mask mandates are lifting? How do we keep people comfortable with all of this? How do we keep people safe? I will just be so glad when it's all behind us. That's all I have to say. And then I can get back to, or actually really dive into more of the work that Deb did before me. But, yeah.
Any other questions? We are so glad you're here. And
Thank you.
for sharing your story.
Thank you for listening to my story. I appreciate it.